Once again, Steve, are you ready?
I'm ready, Spence. Punch it, Chewie!
Welcome to the Fortress of Nerditude podcast, a safe place to talk about all things in nerd and pop culture. I'm Spencer Stapleton, and my co-pilot, as always, is Steve Madura.
Hey, you guys!
We're two best friends that, despite being fathers and husbands, we just refuse to grow all the way up. Thank you for joining us. Today, we are at episode number 4. Wow, Steve, can you believe that?
Wow, a journey through time. My gosh, it's been quite a road.
So today is a little bit different because besides just you and I, we actually have a third co-host joining us for this special episode. It's my wife, Brita Stapleton. Brita, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
So Brita, we usually start off each podcast with talking about how our week was, introducing ourselves a little bit to the listeners so they can kind of get a sneak peek behind the curtain and find out what's going on in our lives. So let me ask you, how has your week been?
It's been good. It's just been super busy and crazy trying to get ready for Christmas, having the in-laws come into town. Had a girls' night on Friday, which was super fun. Yeah, we went to the Melting Pot, which is a fondue restaurant. And if you've never eaten fondue at a restaurant, it's like an event. Like, I told Spence when I left, I said, I'm going to go. I don't know how late I'll be out. And he's like, well, how long do you think you're going to be at the restaurant? I said, we'll be eating for at least an hour and a half. And he was like, an hour and a half? And we ended up eating for like 3 hours. So.
Yeah, what is this, like a European-style eatery?
Well, it's just, you do like all the courses. So you start off. You get your drink, you're sitting there waiting, they bring the pot out and put it on the middle of the table. It's not, like they're cooking everything in front of you, but it's just a pot of the hot whatever it is. So you start off with the cheese course. You got your breads, you got your vegetables, you eat your delicious cheese. And then you sit and wait a while, and then they bring you out a little salad, and you eat your salad. Then you sit and wait a while, and then they finally bring out the broth, and you cook all your meat. And we had steak, we had lobster, we had shrimp, we had chicken, we had mushrooms and broccoli, and I mean, you name it, we ate it. It was delicious.
Right, stop the podcast. I'm going to go upstairs and get a snack. My God.
Yeah, so while you were doing that, just so you know, I had a Hot Pocket for dinner, so... Hot Pocket.
Was it a pepperoni one, though, Spence? Because those are dang good.
Ham and cheese, my friend, ham and cheese.
And then you finish... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say it's always funny because whenever, I've been there a few times and I'm always like expecting to see like Augustus Gloop over in the corner like, I'm full of chocolate. And like Mr. Wonka like, no, my beautiful chocolate. And then he like falls in. That's what I don't know.
So,
very cool.
Anyways, yeah, you finish the whole thing off with a big pot of chocolate and some, delicious marshmallows and brownies and cream puffs and... Yeah, it's a long process to eat all that food and cook it yourself. So you pay someone so you can cook your own food. A lot of money to cook your own food.
But it is an experience, though. It's an experience, and it's one where when you can go and have a meal, whether it's like a Benihana where there's like a presentation, or when there's there's something more than just somebody brings you the food and you eat it. I don't know. I think that's worth the money. I like that. So glad you had a good time.
It was a good, social time there was just 4 of us girls who went and ate, and it was just nice, relaxing time away from the kids, just hanging out and, just enjoying our time and not having to get up from the table 20 times to go get somebody something and just sit there the whole time. It was pretty awesome.
Sounds like you have a pretty good husband to watch the kids and allow you to have a wonderful girls' night.
Yes, he's awesome.
Totally fishing, and it totally worked.
Yeah, let's not forget how awesome your wife is, though.
So, moving on, Steve, how was your week?
my week was good as well. You know, I gotta say though, it is nice to have a woman's touch, Brita. You know, it's almost like having like Aaron Andrews in the locker room after a game. You know, everyone stops giving each other wedgies and snapping towels, and Spencer finally decided to put pants on. So it's really nice to have a woman's touch on the podcast this week. So
glad I could help you out.
yeah, especially with the pants thing. It was getting a little creepy. No, my week was good. Like Brita, like Spencer, we've been in Christmas heck, just getting everything ready and working a lot. You know, we actually, so kind of going along the podcast from last week when we did the best of and the worst of, it was only tonight that I have finally seen the movie White Christmas. And yeah, I know. I am a communist, and I finally have got my citizenship. But it is nothing like I imagined it to be. Nothing. It was good, you know. It was good, but you know. So we watched it with the kids. The kids actually sat through a 2-hour musical. They're like, "Dad, why is there all this singing?" I'm like, "'Cause it's a musical." They did not appreciate that. But anyway, it's good. It's good. Last year I showed them a Christmas Story. A little too young for that. It's always kind of like a thing when you think that your kids are going to like the movies that you watched when you were much older than they are now, and you're like, no, let's just watch it. And then they start repeating some of the things that you forgot were in there, and then your wife says, "I told you they were too young." Yeah. So
don't show them Gremlins yet. I'm just saying it's probably not for them yet.
A great Christmas movie, though, and I actually thought about that after last week's podcast when she has the line when she's like, "My dad played Santa, and then we found him dead in the chimney." I'm like, talk about ruining your Christmas. What's that horrible smell of death coming from the chimney? I don't know. Just poke around up there. Anyway, so my week was good, though. Week was good, and as always, happy to be back, man. Very excited for this show. Been looking forward to it.
Well, my week was pretty good. I had the wonderful opportunity to allow my wife to have a girls' night out, which gave me the chance to...
Still fishing.
Yeah. No, I had a good time with the boys that night. They actually... they had me read books to them and stories, and they were really good, and they went down for me fairly easy, which is always great as a father to have that one moment of perfect fatherhood, which I will never repeat again, I'm sure.
That's what Benadryl does, Spence. That's what Benadryl does.
Sure, yeah. we just call it the purple medicine.
That's right.
I had a good week though. Like Brita was saying, my mom's in town, and my younger sister's getting ready to come into town. So the whole Stapleton clan is assembling for Christmas, and we're excited about that. I got to totally trash my best friend in a competition last week, deciding who has the best and the worst Christmas.
Okay.
It was pretty good. So
that's the highlight of your week. Oh my gosh, you have no
talked
soul,
about it
Stapleton.
all week.
Oh my gosh,
you
gloated all week.
Listen. Winning is always the highlight of everything. I'm just saying. I'm competitive. What can I say?
The Springsteen thing was a lob, so you would win, you'd feel good, and you'd have a good week. So I'm glad I could give that to you. Red carpet.
You can sell that crap anywhere you want to, but you picked that nasty old man because you thought it was good, and I know the truth because I know you. But let's not get into that. Let's glide on by, because we have some things to talk about tonight. So let's go ahead and let's, Steve, jump right into Rebel Intelligence. And as always, Steve, many Bothans died to bring us this information.
Rest in peace, Bothans. Rest in peace, you Bothans.
Okay, so the first thing I had that I wanted to talk about really quick, the new game from Nintendo, meant to be played on your mobile device, Super Mario Run. Now, I don't know if you've taken a look at this thing yet, but it's basically like a Mario game on your phone. It's the first type of game they've put out, but it came with a $10 price tag, $9.99.
What?
And instead of kind of going the freemium route, like a lot of these bigger companies do, where they put it out for free and then they give you micro in-game transactions, they gave it all to you for $10. But the problem is that it hasn't got great reviews. It's only got like a 2.5 or so review in the iTunes store. And so because of that, Nintendo stocks have fallen like 7% or so in the last day or two, which, I mean, come on, it's Mario, right? I mean, you get to play basically like a full Mario game, so to speak, on your phone. How is that not going to work, Steve?
Our podcast has better reviews than we're beating Nintendo, Spence. Do you realize that? Hot dog.
Nice. I like it. Anyway, it's just interesting because I'm a big gamer, and Mario has been a character, and Nintendo's been a system and a company that I've been tied to since I was a wee lad. And I just, man, to hear that they lost 7% of their value on the stock market after the release of this game, I would have thought it would have been the other way, to tell you the truth.
Well, it's a good time to buy. That's all I'll say. It's a good time to buy.
Apparently.
But didn't the same thing happen though with Pokemon Go? That came out. It was a hot thing. Their stock went up. I think it was like it wasn't 17%, but it was like 7% or 10%, whatever, for a week, and then it came back down. So I'm sure the same thing will happen. A little dip.
Well,
The hills and valleys.
I think the difference, though, on a game like that is it's free. You download the game for free, and then they
Sure.
give you transactions so you can purchase things in-game. So they're continually making money by people that are staying. Granted, they lost like 15 million daily active users after the first month. But, I mean, if they
Right.
still have, let's say, 5 million active users, and let's say a fifth of them purchase something once a month, even if it's only $5, that's continued revenue coming in. This game is you're going to buy it once and then nothing else.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, hopefully they can rely on the revenue from the throwback, Nintendo that seems to not be able to stay on shelves. So,
Yep,
win
NES
some, lose some.
classic. Yep, and they do have the Switch coming out in March, so we'll see what that does for them.
Yeah, that's true. So I had one. It's not so much nerd related. Well, it probably is because this guy's got to be a nerd. So a buddy of mine, Ed Beck, shout out to Ed, sent me this article, and it was in Bloomberg or something like that. But it was a man in Maine who fought the Secretary of State in Maine to get approval to wear a goat horned headdress and he argued that it was part of his pagan religion, and he got it approved, and so he gets to wear these sweet goat horns, and I just thought it was a funny article. What's funny about it, what I find most funny, is that when he went to go plead his case, he went to the ACLU and they wouldn't even take the case. It's bad. That's like Diamond Dustin saying, Dustin Diamond saying no to like a Saved by the Bell reunion on ice. Like that just doesn't happen. ACLU saying no?
So wait a minute. Now he gets to wear this where? Like, is he using this for like official government business? Is this like
This
a
is
driver's
his
license?
driver's license. Yeah, this is his driver's license photo.
See,
and
I have a problem with this because I wanted to wear my Cubs baseball cap for my ID in college, and they wouldn't allow that. But this
that
guy
is
gets
much
to wear,
more of a much more religious experience than a pagan headdress.
That is what I'm saying, man. The Cubs are, but paganism, I'm not down with that. But the Cubs, I'm down with.
Unless the pagans, get a national baseball team and win the championship, then I might be on board. Maybe.
No.
Rita, what do you think? Headdress or no?
I say no. I mean, you can't wear a hat in a picture. You can't have any sort of and you only wear glasses if you have to wear the glasses when you're driving. Why is the guy going to wear a pagan headdress in his picture? I mean, everyone else's pictures are bad enough.
So what if somebody actually had horns growing out of their head, and and they were they were lambasted for having them? Sometimes people have congenital. They have linked twins. They have a third arm or a sixth finger, maybe a pigtail. I mean, what would you think about that?
Cricket. I mean, where do you want us to go with this? What if
really, Steve?
What if this person had a seventh arm growing out of their appendix, and we had to let them take a picture with it?
No. Do you remember that one movie?
We're just gonna play the what if game now.
Yeah, we're digressing, but there was a movie. It was called Shallow Hal, and do you remember that Jason Alexander in the movie has a pigtail, and it finally comes out, and then the girl's like, "I think it's cute."
Yeah,
I don't know.
No, it's a vestigial tail.
Right. It still creeps me out.
Wiggles like a dog's tail or something.
It haunts my dreams. I wake up sometimes. I'm like, do I have a pigtail?
But that's not going to be in an official government photo.
Well,
Wow, that would be an interesting official government photo.
Right?
I was just saying something like unto it. Pigtail, horns, sixth finger. Anyway.
That is really weird. What was your friend's name that recommended this article to you?
Mr. Ed Beck. Mr. Ed
Never,
Beck.
never speak to Ed Beck again because that's some weird, crazy stuff he's recommending for you to read.
Ed, you're out of the will. Sorry. You're
Sorry,
cut off. You're dead to me.
Sorry, Ed. Sorry. One last thing I want to talk about, and it's definitely going to tie into our discussion, is Rogue One, which we are going to do our movie review on tonight. We are talking about Rogue One, Star Wars Story tonight. Over the weekend, its opening weekend made $155 million in the domestic box office and $290 million worldwide. Now, that is the weekend before the Christmas weekend. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to have time on their hands this upcoming weekend. I think this movie is going to be doing big, big business.
Yeah. It always seems to be that it really is the timing of the release of a movie. Sometimes that can make or break a movie. Something goes over, budget or over deadline or whatever, and they miss their window, and you'll never hear of it again. So they did well to, position it, right smack dab before the Christmas runway.
Right. So let's move on. Let's get right into Rogue One. So we are going to do a movie review on Rogue One, A Star Wars Story right now. Now listen, we're not going to spoil this for you if you're listening to the podcast and you haven't seen the movie yet. We're not going to do that. However, at the very end of the podcast, we're going to give you fair warning. We're going to let you know that we are done with the normal podcast, and now we're going into a spoiler cast or Fortress of Nerditude After Dark. However you want to look at it.
This is like the curtain in the back of the old video stores. You're like, don't go behind the curtain.
Wow. Maybe not that creepy, but we are going to let you in. At the end of it, we will do a spoiler cast. We will talk about plot. We will talk about characters. We will talk about things that if you have seen the movie, you're gonna enjoy it because we're gonna talk about things and our views and opinions and our thoughts. But if you haven't, by all means, listen to our warning and do not go on until you go out and see it. And I'm just going to say this. If you haven't seen it yet, by the time this releases, make plans with your family, get your Christmas in order, and go see this movie because we want you to be able to listen to this and listen to the spoiler cast at the end.
And Disney needs the money.
Yeah, for sure.
Obviously.
Okay, so last week we talked about Christmas, the best and the worst. We asked you for your Christmas memories, but we're going to hold off on that. We'll ask you again for next week, the week right after Christmas, because we do want to do this. This is our movie club week, and we're going to discuss the movie we saw, which was Rogue One: A Star Wars Story. So we're going to hold off on questions until then. So let's get right into this, guys. Star Wars, big business. Star Wars has been around, been a part of my life for my entire life. And I'm always excited when a new Star Wars movie is going to come up. I have worked really, really hard not to know too much about this and try to avoid certain parts of the internet. Were you guys trying to do that as well? Were you guys trying to go into this fresh and clear?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, really all I saw ever was a couple of previews, and then anything that we talked about. I didn't want to know too much going into it. I mean, I felt like I already knew too much about it anyway. I feel like I kind of already knew the plot going into it. We know what's going to happen, but I didn't want anything else because it's just fun to go into a Star Wars movie, and just have it be fresh and not really have an idea of what's going to be happening.
Yeah, same. I went in to be perfectly honest, and this is I'm going to admit this here because this is a safe place. I went in, I sit down, I recline my chair, which took me about 12 minutes to figure out how to do it without asking like a neighboring person because they've upgraded the theater that I go to. Anyway, and they're going to the store. I'm like, what the freak? Like some of the things, and we'll get into it. But I was a little off on my chronology. I'm like, when the crap is this even taking place? Of course, because the last movie you watch, and I kind of did a refresh, was The Force Awakens. I'm like, where's Luke? What's going on here? And anyway, so once after about 10 minutes, I'm like, okay, I know where this all fits now. Here we go. Let's go.
So it took you a little while to kind of get comfortable, get your chair right, and then mentally figure out where you were?
Exactly. I was like, where are the Ewoks? What's going on?
I thought
I
I
mean,
thought this
it
took
was pretty
place on
sad.
an ice planet.
Right,
So
exactly.
weird.
Yeah,
I
so
I really I really tried to temper my expectations, and I really tried to keep myself from seeing too much. I didn't want to know too much, because for me it's like you only get to experience something once.
yep,
And if you spoil that, you're never going to have that impact. I mean, it's when people say, "Oh, hey, did you watch the ball game?" And you say, "No, I've got it recorded at home. I'm going to go home and I'm going to watch it. So please don't tell me." They go, "Oh, the Cubs won in overtime." Man, you didn't listen to what I said, first of all. Now I know what happens, and so the desire to like watch a full 3.5 hour baseball game just
right.
dies. It's like, nope, I know what happens now. There's no mystery. But that's how I feel about sports, right? So, okay, you guys tell me. I was a little worried because I know what happens. This story, the basic premise of this story, and this doesn't give too much away, is the story of how the rebels steal the plans for the first Death Star.
Right.
We know what happens. We know that they steal the plans. We know that those plans end up in Princess Leia's hands. She gives them off to R2. Boom, the pod crashes on Tatooine. It gets to Luke and Obi-Wan. They find Han Solo. Boom, off they go, and they're on the Death Star. They deactivate the shield. They escape. Battle of Yavin. Trench run. Use the Force, Luke. Boom, small thermal port above the main port. Right? We know all this. That's Episode 4, A New Hope, or Star Wars as we just called it as kids. We know that's going to happen. So my trepidation was, how are they going to tell a story that's going to keep me emotionally involved or really care
Exactly.
for 2 hours? Did you guys feel that way going into it, at least?
I did. Once like I said, I got my bearings. I kind of thought the same thing of like this has it's kind of an odd niche of where this has to fit. From the new prequels to Star Wars: A New Hope, and I was a little unsure as to how that was going to work out and how that was gonna fit, how that puzzle piece was going to work. And if it was really a story worth telling, or as fans, could we just logically kind of make the jump from the last prequel into Star Wars, and did it need to be told?
Right. I really had that going in, and then when I watched this movie, I'll tell you what that movie did for me. Uh, First of all, it gave me great background on what the rebels went through to get the plans. Um, you know, uh, Without getting too much into it, but like they had to go through trials and tribulations, and they had to confirm stuff, and then they had to figure all this out, and it actually made, and we'll talk about this in the end, but it made they made some conscious choices when they filmed this movie that made me, as soon as this movie was over, I turned to Brita and I said, I want to go home and I want to watch Episode 4, A New Hope, right now, because it
Right.
gave me there's just some things that happen that like adds like a layer of complexity now to A New Hope that hadn't been there before. Now, for me, that is amazing, because now I'm looking at a movie that I've seen thousands of times all my life, and there's a new layer of complexity, and I'm going to look at it with different eyes. So I'm going to have this new experience with an old movie. That is amazing.
Yeah, that they could do that with a story and basically recast an old story that's been part of pop culture and part of our lives. One thing that I really took away from it as well, Spence, kind of piggybacking off what you said, is just how much loss, how much sacrifice the rebels had to make to get even to that point. I mean, from kids, and it's very rare, I think, in a movie like Star Wars was, when you just start up into a story, right? You've started in, you don't really know who these characters are, but everything's just kind of laid before you. But to know the backstory, to know everything that they had to go through, the people they had to lose, all of those things to make that happen, for the springboard of Star Wars: A New Hope, it really did the same for me.
Right. Brita, when we watched the movie, you made some sort of comment to me about like the visuals and how stunning you thought everything looked.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's, this movie, I feel like, I mean, it's similar to other Star Wars movies, but also very different because you just get a different look at, I don't know, I guess you just get a different side of everything.
Well, I mean, obviously there's different locales that they're at.
Right.
So that, but like, I remember you said something to me along the lines of that you just thought that everything looked like really, really sharp. And I don't know if maybe that's just because of the technology they're using, but it seemed like they paid attention to great detail, visually speaking, when they showed things and some of the camera shots they had in there. One of the things I really noticed as you were saying this and you kind of pointing this out as we were watching it, was that they really it did okay. So it lacked the J.J. Abrams like lens flares that he's famous for and that he had in the
Right.
Force Awakens. It didn't have any of that stuff, but it seemed like they took great pains to really give things scale and depth. So, for instance, when they show the Death Star for the first time, and this isn't a spoiler, come in, we're talking about the Death Star, right, and stealing the plans. But when they show the Death Star for the first time, and they show them kind of putting in the big array for the weapon, like you see a handful of Star Destroyers, and these things up close look so small compared to the Death Star. And in my mind, I'm so used to thinking of these things as massive and huge. And so visually, it just really paints this portrait of how big and massive the Death Star truly was, which once again just adds to the Star Wars A New Hope.
It's funny. Oh, go ahead, Rita.
Oh no, I was just gonna agree with that. I mean, it's interesting because, you know, like you were talking about with Star Destroyers and everything, and when you see them next to the Death Star, like that thing is just huge. And I feel like sometimes you don't quite get that scope in the original movies. I mean, you see it and they're like, "What's that, a moon?" And you know, but when you see it right next to those ships that you already know are gigantic, like that thing is huge, and you just get a different perspective because they're showing, like you're talking about, that array dish like moving in, and you see all those ships just flying right by it, and it just, I don't know, it just, they did that really well. I really like that.
I think going along the conversation that they had in Clerks, I mean, you think about the employment base that they really utilized to build that. That was a fantastic economic stimulus to the galaxy. That's you can't fault the Empire for that.
Slave labor. I mean,
Rome wasn't built in a day, Spence. Can't break an omelet without breaking a few eggs.
Something else, like kind of go along the visuals, I really noticed was, and Steve, you tell me, because I know Brita and I talked about this, but Steve, you tell me if you caught this. A lot of the characters had 70s style haircuts, sideburns, mustaches, and I looked at that and I went, wow. Because when the originals were filmed, they were filmed in the mid 70s, and then getting in towards the later 70s and early 80s. But
right.
when they filmed the other movies, they were filmed at different times. But so they used in the originals kind of current hairstyles and facial hairstyles and whatnot. And this movie, as kind of a throwback, so it kind of seems to blend in with the Episode 4, they had a lot of these characters sporting 70s style mustaches and mutton chops and sideburns and hairstyles that are all kind of feathered, and I thought that was a really cool little kind of value add piece to the movie.
Yeah, no, I saw that as well, and it was nice that as they as they got further along in the movie, and you started to see some of these costumes and whatnot that you're familiar with from Star Wars: A New Hope, and they really did a good job, I think, of bridging the gap between those two. So yeah, no, I agree. I think you definitely felt kind of this 70s feel with some of the, but it was subtle. It was subtle enough to enjoy. If it would have been overt, I think it would have been a little bit distracting. But it wasn't. It was tastefully done.
Yeah, it just made it more cohesive. Like you could see it moving from this movie right into A New Hope. I mean, even Jyn Erso, the main character in this film, like she, had like that just like kind of 70s hair, like the middle part, and it just kind of like coming around her face and everything. Like it just kind of worked without, it looked modern, but also in the past, as Star Wars somehow fits in that little niche right there.
Right.
So
Right.
Yeah, I just thought overall visually it was a great movie. It's one of those ones where it's going to look good at home on your screen, on your laptop or tablet or big screen TV. But man, it's really one that you want to see in the movie theater to really fully enjoy. We saw it on just a normal 2D screen. Steve, you said you were doing the IMAX, right?
I did the 3D, so I didn't do IMAX. I did the 3D, and to be perfectly honest, the only reason I did that was because of the timing of when the movie was playing. I'm like, this one fits well on my schedule, and I'm willing to pay $5 extra to have an extra hour of sleep. So I went. I don't actually like watching movies in 3D. Just is my preference. And this one, there were only really a few times when I think I really noticed the perception, the kind of the perspective that it lent. There was actually a trailer for some pig star, the voice animated whatever that Sing, yeah, that it actually worked much better when some the darts were being shot. I was like, whoa, that really worked well. And then for the actual movie that I came to pay for, it was okay. It was fine.
I'm not a 3D fan. It gives me a headache. I don't like watching it that way. I get it. Most of these movies that do 3D, they do it in post-production, and they can add like an extra $4 million into post-production, and they can charge bigger ticket sales, and they make money doing it, and that's why they continue to do it. Yep. But for my money, it's not worth it. And
I agree.
I find it really distracting. Because I'm constantly looking and being like, is this supposed to be 3D or not? And then the glasses don't always stay on your face. And I wear my glasses when I go to the movie theater, so I'm not squinting at the screen.
That's right.
I do wear double glasses. It's just very distracting. I just do not enjoy it at all.
Yes, as it was with me. So
did you feel though it was distracting for your movie-going experience, or just right up front during the previews?
I mean, it was okay. It's not my preference. It's okay. But again, I wear glasses as well, so having two glasses on at the same time, I'm like, should have thought about this. Should have thrown the old contacts in.
Gotcha.
But
I thought it was great visually. I loved it. I just loved the visuals.
One thing that I'm going to say though, and I'll be upfront about this, is I do kind of feel like this is a fan movie. I feel like if you came in, not maybe, I don't know who hasn't seen the first few, Star Wars, whatnot, but if you came into this kind of cold turkey, it would be I don't know if it would be as enjoyable. I mean, the first 5 minutes, I felt like they jumped around to like 7 different planets or geographies or locales and a bunch of different storylines, and I'm like, whoa, hold up, I'm trying to just pronounce the names on the bottom of the screen and get the characters and whatnot. So I felt like that could have been a little bit better. I mean, I don't know, again, who's doing the writing for these now, but
so I do agree that this movie did have more of a feel of like fan service, right? They wanted to appeal to hardcore fans in some ways, and there were some things that they did to do that, and we will definitely talk about that in the spoiler cast at the end. But what I actually thought though when I watched that is that all of the main characters in this movie were all, for the most part, all brand new characters. They weren't characters they were trying to shoehorn in for the most part, and I found that was pretty good. But what I did notice is, and granted, I am admittedly a massive fan of Star Wars, but I found that I came away with the impression going, I think a normal person who maybe has never seen a Star Wars could come in, because I felt like they tried to hit on a lot of themes and set things up that anyone could really follow along. But there was definitely going to be lots of like little sight gags or like little drop-ins of characters. So matter of fact, and this doesn't give anything away, but one of the first scenes, they show a scene at a kitchen table, and there's a little pitcher there of blue milk. And I immediately just kind of like lit a burrito. I was like, haha, blue milk, and just kind of laughed a little bit. Because it's the same blue milk that Aunt Beru serves to Luke in the very beginning of A New Hope, and I just looked at that and I went, that's awesome. It's a little thing that fans are going to pick up on and love, and it's just going to be that little extra little bit that's going to put them over the top for their love of this movie. But for a normal person, they're going to see it and they're not going to think much of it, but it's not going to it's not going to detract from the story.
Right, which I think this movie does that really well. Like, I think it's definitely a kind of a movie that someone who has no Star Wars experience can actually come into and watch and enjoy just on a one-off basis, because it's not the whole Skywalker saga. It's not, everything that we've known about Star Wars in the past. It's this separate little story about this little group of people and, basically all new characters. And I really think it's, and it's not going to be an ongoing story, obviously, but I think it's definitely one that someone who doesn't really have a lot of knowledge about Star Wars can come in and still enjoy this movie and go away saying that was a good movie.
I really liked the fact that this wasn't a continuation of the Skywalker / Solo family.
Right.
That it was different, and I know that they're going to be doing a Han Solo standalone movie coming up in like another 2 years. That's going to be kind of a break from the main films. And so after seeing this, I'm really excited for that, because if it has the same kind of feel and it's a story told in the same universe, but it doesn't have to continue on with, the characters in the main, films, I'm okay with that. I think I'm really excited for this thing.
Yeah. As I read some reviews after the movie, I came home and immediately hopped online and started reading some reviews. And it's interesting when you hear the perspective from George Lucas's point of view, where way back in the day when he made the original, he said, I've got 9 movies in the queue and I've got this whole plan and yada yada yada. And then over the years, he's kind of waffled back and forth as to if he was going to do them, if he was not, if he wanted to be involved, if he didn't. Obviously, he finally sold the rights to Disney and yada yada yada, and so the story goes. But he always had in his mind to say it would be an interesting thing to catch up with Luke and Han and Leia, when they're 60s, when they're 70s. Or in their 60s or 70s, and he references, Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford and whatnot. And then one thing funny that he says, but what I didn't realize is when I would catch up with these characters, I would be that age too, and it would take a lot more out of me to make these movies. So time catches up with all of us, Georgie.
That's true. The kind of funny thing and a little side note to that is, I heard that too. He originally said it was going to be 9 movies, and then he waffled on it and said no, it was only going to be 3, and then he said no, it was supposed to be 6,
right.
And kind of back and forth. But in the mid 90s, there was an author, Timothy Zahn, who wrote 3 books: Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and The Last Command, and they follow Luke and Leia and Han and Chewie about 5 years after the events of Return of the Jedi. And they're great books. If you haven't read them, go read them. They're excellent. They were used to be considered, part of what was called the expanded universe. A lot of authors wrote Star Wars books and things of that nature. But once Disney bought Lucasfilm, they basically kind of axed all that and said, this is all kind of legacy stuff now, but it's not actually official canon. And so they kind of said, like, essentially none of this stuff has ever really happened. It gives them a chance to tell their own stories, which is what they did here with Rogue One. They told their own story, but that doesn't mean that they still can't bring in characters or stories from the old expanded universe. But those 3 books, George Lucas had even made a comment saying that, that these were great stories to continue on, following the main ones, and that he really enjoyed them, and that he supported him and gave kind of his, thumbs up approval for. And that was one of the main reasons I read those 3 books back in the day, and I've read them a few times. But it was good. It was good, to see that we had all of that for so long, and then Disney kind of took it back and said, it's legacy now. It's not really called the expanded universe, and none of that's canon. But it's great that they're gonna do these other stories and continue on, because they can bring stuff back in. And even if they don't, it's nice to know that they're looking to the future about how they can continue telling stories in this universe, which is what I think a lot of people want.
Yeah. So let me ask this, guys. So I think we've seen this in the different iterations of the Star Wars films, where they use actors and actresses that maybe are not as well known. So we've got Felicity Jones, we've got Diego Luna, obviously Forrest Whitaker is a big name. But what did you guys think of the main cast of characters and how they did?
I thought they did great. I mean, I looked at them, and as I was kind of watching the film, I was trying to take a look and see like how they were doing, and I thought Felicity Jones, who played Jyn Erso, was excellent. I thought she acted it very, very well. I thought she was very convincing in playing her part. Same thing with Diego Luna, who played Cassian Andor, the kind of the rebel pilot that kind of is, helping her along. Like, I thought they were great. I thought they had great chemistry. Like they felt, hey, we're really working together and whatnot. But some of the others, obviously, gosh, what's his name? Obviously, like Jimmy Smits, who shows up and is Bail Organa, and he's in the film. Obviously he's a big name actor, and obviously Forrest Whitaker, who played Saw Gerrera, is a big name actor.
Right.
But then there's like the character Mads Mikkelsen, who played the character Galen Erso, and Brita, go ahead and you tell him what you kept saying the whole movie.
Oh my gosh. Every time I saw him in the movie, every time I just kept waiting for blood to start dripping out of his eye.
From Casino Royale, exactly.
Oh my gosh.
He's a great actor.
It took me until like towards the end of the movie before I was like okay with him like being who he was. I was just like, every time it was just getting me.
Yep. No, I felt the same thing. I was like, wait a minute. I don't expect you to talk, Mr. Bond. I expect you to die, which I know is a totally different Bond movie, but that kept running through my head as well. A great actor, though. Fantastic actor.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't actually...
He was fantastic.
I didn't recognize him when he was, in his farming garb. I was like, I didn't really recognize him, but yeah, he was fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think about K2SO?
Me personally, I thought K2SO was amazing. I fully expected them to have some sort of robot or droid in this film in a more major role. Because,
Right.
We've seen C-3PO and R2-D2 in every Star Wars film, and they played big roles in all the films, basically. They may not have had the meatiest of roles, but their characters, as far as the story, had some pretty important things that happened. So... Yep. I was excited for K2SO, and I was hoping that it was going to be more than just a single shot or two of him and a little bit of dialogue. Man, really, really funny. His character was comic relief, but this character, voiced by Alan Tudyk, who's a great actor in his own right and a great voice actor. I constantly think of him as the voice of King Candy from Wreck-It Ralph. It's salmon. It's salmon. Have a little candy. Just my kid's been watching Wreck-It Ralph, if you can't tell. But he did great in it, and I know he also did like the mocap, the motion capture,
right.
for it as well. And I thought
so he basically spent like all of production on like stilts. Like I read some reviews, so he's like running around in the sand.
Real?
Yeah, with stilts on. And
I didn't know any of this.
Yeah, so he was he was in full garb, and that's why you see in the film his motions are not like C-3PO and R2-D2, obviously, which were very robotic. It's very natural. It's very very fluid.
Yeah, I was really surprised because I didn't know that this character was in this. Like I said, I didn't know a whole lot about this movie going in at first. Obviously, you always assume there's some sort of droid of some kind, but when he came on and he was just like the way he was acting and talking and looking, I was just really kind of taken aback at first. And then I just really loved this character. He was just very entertaining. He actually reminded me a lot of, and now I'm going to forget his name. Was it Marvin, the depressed robot?
I thought you like Marvin the Martian, like that P2000 space modulator. I'm like, that's totally different.
No, from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
I gotcha.
He kind of just reminded me of that because he was always like,
Which, by the way, Marvin the robot was voiced by none other than Hans Gruber, a.k.a. Professor Snape.
Are you serious?
A.k.a.
Yeah.
Wow. Hans Gruber.
Hans Gruber. No.
He can't also be known as the same name that you just gave.
He's
It would
always going
just
to be
be it would
Hans
just
Gruber
be
to me.
known as. Right. No, I thought Alan Tudyk, he stole the show. I thought K2SO was fantastic. The first time that he meets Jen Erso, I thought was hilarious, and he makes this line in there where he's talking to Cassie, and he's saying, the probability of her using your blaster against you is highly likely, and then he's like, I don't want to hear it, I don't want to hear it. Highly likely. And then they take off. I just thought great comic relief.
Well, not
Yeah.
not only that, but like it's so each of the droids in the Star Wars universe all have a little bit of a different personality. So, for instance, C-3PO is kind of like a neurotic character, and kind of has a neurosis about him.
Right.
R2-D2 is just kind of like spunky and kind of does his own thing. In the Rebels cartoon, which is on Disney XD, Chopper has like this kind of like rebellious nature to him. BB-8 in The Force Awakens just kind of seemed like very bubbly and playful.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
K2SO in this was kind of like sarcastic and like just I guess maybe sarcastic and a little surly even.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was so good because it's just a different view. A droid, obviously gets imprinted upon by the people it's around, and then obviously it's programming. And I just thought that was so funny. I mean, he was spot on. Alan Tudyk, great job. I highly endorse your work on this movie.
He's listening.
Of course he is, sure.
Obviously.
Yeah, so I don't know what it is about reprogramming a droid that makes it sassy for some reason, but it seems to happen. So there's a pattern there.
I liked it. So one of the things I noticed, and I had a conversation with my brother about this today when they came over for Charlie's 4th birthday party. We had that today. We were talking about the movie, and he asked me what did I think that John Williams didn't do the soundtrack for this movie. Did you guys notice that? Were you even aware that John Williams did not do the soundtrack for this movie?
Who's John Williams? I'm kidding. No.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, I did not realize that he did not do the movie soundtrack.
So
yeah, I didn't learn that until today when I was listening to another podcast that was kind of talking about this for a minute, and they started talking about the score, and I was like, oh, I didn't realize that wasn't John Williams.
Now
because I just thought it worked
miffed.
so well.
I want my money back.
Obviously, the big themes, because they do kind of play on the Imperial March,
right.
and they do kind of have some of the Tatooine music, and some of the other things that go on are obviously John Williams stuff. So they did have some of the John Williams music in the film, but my guess is, and I don't know this for sure. I mean, I wasn't there, I wasn't in the meetings, but my guess is that John Williams is extremely busy right now scoring Episode 8. And he's doing the music for that, obviously.
True that.
So we know that's the case.
Yeah.
But the guy who scored this, and I'm gonna get his name completely wrong, but it's like Michael Gianchi, something like that. He has scored movies for J.J. Abrams, things like Lost. He scored the most recent Star Trek movies. It's really good. I really thought the score in this movie was excellent, on point, just perfect. I never felt that it was like really out of place or that the music didn't match. And then he found a way to fold back in the John Williams stuff at certain key moments, and I thought it was really well. Did you guys think like it stood out, or did you notice anything weird?
No, I totally loved this score because I was thinking this the whole time I was watching the movie. Is you would just hear, just little bits of different themes from the original movies, but not the whole thing. So just throw in just a tiny little hint of one of those themes, and then it'd go into this new music, which I thought was beautiful and just fit the movie really well. And I love that because it's just like a little bit of a kick towards the original, but it's not putting all that in because this isn't that same story. And I love that until, there's a certain few parts where obviously they do have some of those original themes.
Yeah, going back to the 70s motif and the characters and whatnot. I mean, the same with the music. I think Bria hit it on the head that the subtle kind of bows, homages to the previous score. I thought was good. I thought there are a few scenes in the end, specifically, we'll get into this later, but some pretty epic scenes where I thought the music made the moment. So I thought
Right.
it was good, and it was not distracting in the least that that someone else did the music.
I found that as we walked out, I immediately thought. So I'm not a big soundtrack guy, a big score guy, except when it comes to the Star Wars movies. And I've listened to the score for the original trilogy so many times. I've got the double discs that were re-released where it's everything, that I can listen to the score and know exactly where we're at in the movie and exactly what's going on and who just said what. I've listened to it over and over and over and over again. And I found myself thinking on the car ride home from the movie that I want to go out and get this soundtrack and I want to listen to it, because I just thought the music was beautiful. Just really, really, really beautiful in this movie. And I don't really do that for hardly anything except Star Wars stuff. And it has to be good Star Wars stuff because I don't own the soundtrack to the prequels.
Well, I think it was that, and then the Bodyguard soundtrack was your other one that you really love. Whitney Houston.
Listen, Whitney Houston can sing the phone book and I'll listen. So yes, of course I had that.
Right. All right. Just getting that out there.
Okay.
Now, I do love Whitney Houston. And I don't know why I'm just thinking of Whitney Houston now. You got me. And
the reason is because that was literally the first CD that I ever bought. I don't know, just small side note. Yeah, I know, ridiculous, but yeah, first CD I ever bought. Bodyguard soundtrack.
Mine was Boyz II Men, Coolidge High Harmony. Just saying.
Ooh.
Cooley High Harmony, and that was also mine.
Wow, match made in heaven there.
What up,
kiddos?
That's why we're married.
So check this out. So small side note. So when my mom, bless her heart, went to get me my first boombox, it was like this GE boombox. It was about the size of a shoebox, and I thought it was the ghetto blaster. I'd put it on my shoulders, walk around the house like I was a little thuglet. But she got me 2 tapes. This was back in the day of tapes, and one was Beastie Boys' "License to Ill." She's like, it had a plane on it. And as you unfolded, the lyrics and whatnot, it's actually a cigarette. That's right. It's a cigarette. So her 9-year-old son was in his room singing Brass Monkey, that funky. And didn't know it was an alcoholic drink until much later in life. That's right. Yeah, that's right. The second tape she bought me, this one called Rap Dance. Probably the first rap album ever put out there. It was an hour and a half, double-sided, of this phrase. Rap Dance. Rap dance, wicked, rap dance, and that's all it did for an hour and a half.
I must say, Steve, your mom has always been ahead of the time when it comes to music, and I like that she was very progressive in her musical taste and what she allowed her son to listen to.
She and David Bowie, man, they were on the cusp of it all.
Gotta love Nancy. Nancy.
Sorry for the aside. Had to get that out there.
Okay, so I have a question for you guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how did you feel about the start of the Star Wars movie, the very beginning, and no Star Wars crawl?
Well, I was okay with it. Because of this reason only. They wanted it to be a different type of Star Wars movie. They didn't want it to be one of the major films, in the we'll say the main sequence, so to speak. So I was kind of looking for it, and then after about the first 90 seconds to 2 minutes, I was like, yeah, they're not doing this. They're just jumping right in.
Right.
I'm okay with that. I'm cool with that. I don't need to have it. I like it, and it makes me feel warm and fuzzy when I see it. But I was okay with it. Steve, what about you?
It's like a safety blanket. I was still trying to figure out how to recline my seat for the first 3 or 4 minutes. So I was totally
just didn't even notice.
No, not even. I didn't. It's like waking up and you slept somewhere else, not your bedroom. You're like, where am I? Where am I? I'm late for school. Yeah, so no, I would have liked to have seen it. Again, I kind of said earlier, I didn't particularly care for the beginning of the movie. I thought it was kind of all over the place, and so just trying to hold on by any shoestring I could to stay connected with the story. So I would have liked to have seen it.
I didn't mind that it wasn't there. I felt like once I realized that it wasn't there, and after the movie was over, I thought about it, and I was like, yeah, I guess, because the opening crawl usually just gives you a
That's right.
history of what's been going on.
Exactly. Where were we
now?
So
where we are now, because we'd come right in the middle of the story, and we weren't in the middle of a story at that point, it felt like. It was just kind of just starting, so.
Yeah. Yeah, for the layman who could have used the digital crawl cliff notes, I could have used that, but no, no, I see your point.
So I'm okay with it. I thought the movie at the beginning started off pretty well, actually. I really enjoyed the beginning only because I think that they were trying to give us essentially the crawl, but through the actual storytelling of the film. I think they set up pretty quickly within maybe the first, 5 to 10 minutes, what is going on and where this kind of movie is going to go. Not in so many words, but they really kind of say, "Hey, we're pointing this direction, and this is where we're going." So I actually thought it was pretty good. I really enjoyed it. Um, a crawl would have been fine. I could have done with it. I wouldn't have said no, but
Right.
I was good. I
I
felt
don't think it took anything away from it, though, not having
right,
it.
right. It didn't
Yeah.
take anything away. I felt like the pacing of the movie was really good. We went and saw a really late show. It was an 11 o'clock show because Brita had gone out the night before with the girls. We decided to go out Saturday night, and we saw an 11 o'clock. And of course, being that now Disney owns Lucasfilm, we had to sit through about 30 minutes of previews. So it was really like 11:30 when this show started, and we didn't get home till like 2 a.m. And that usually would mean I would be extremely sleepy or have fallen asleep through the movie that late at night. But I found that the pacing of the movie really moved along. I never felt that it got really slow, and it never gave me a chance to kind of like have that adrenaline kind of drop off some and get tired. Did you guys? That was my experience at least, and I know Brita was pretty much wide awake, right?
Oh yeah. I didn't have any problem staying awake in that movie.
Should have sprung for the 3D, brother. Should have sprung for the IMAX. Could have got an hour. I didn't notice one way or the other. I thought that once, like I said, once we got into it, I thought it was good, and yeah, did a good job kind of going back and forth between characters as they have to with different storylines and plot lines going. But I thought it did a nice job at bringing them all together into kind of the climactic finish. So yeah, I thought the pacing was good. I was engaged, so it was good.
Right. So, yeah, I overall my impressions of this movie, and I know this is a very bold claim. Um, this is going to rank up as one of my more favorite Star Wars movies. I think if I'm doing my own personal ranking, I think this is above the prequels, for hands down, easily above the prequels. I actually think for me this is above The Force Awakens. Um, I really, don't get me wrong, I loved The Force Awakens. I really did love it. But essentially, it was just a retelling of A New Hope. And so for me, there's always going to be a little bit of a ding against it, just a little one, because I did love that movie. There's not a lot to complain about. But it was a retelling of the original. But this one, it had this kind of like thriller kind of feel to it, this kind of like political movie, kind of like 1970s kind of vibe to it, but it wasn't heavy. And if I'm ranking it, I'm going to say Empire Strikes Back is my number one. Then it's going to be Star Wars A New Hope. And then it's probably going to be Return of the Jedi, then Rogue One. That's where I'm going to put it in the rest. And then it'll be Force Awakens, and then I don't care about the last three. You can roll the dice and put them wherever you want at the end.
Nice. Yeah, no, I think it's gonna hold its own as the new ones come out as well, and for the true fans, I think it's a big payoff to connect to the storyline. One thing that I wanted to ask you guys, and we talked about this a little bit in the last episode, Spencer, was the kind of the CGI, with Grand Moff Tarkin, and wanted just to find out what your thoughts were on that. One thing that I felt like was, did you feel like there was a little bit of a visually a little bit of a difference, and was it noticeable enough that it took away from the movie?
Okay, so we did mention in the last podcast that we talked about this that there'd been hints and rumors that Grand Moff Tarkin was going to be in it. We kind of alluded to the Coachella Tupac type of hologram, which actually, if they would have used him in a hologram, kind of like a hologram communication, I actually think that would have worked out better than the way it did.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would have been a little easier to hide some of the fact that Peter Cushing's been dead since 1994.
Right.
However, that being said, I thought that it looked so obviously, and we're not going to spoil it, and we're not going to spoil kind of what happens, but they use CGI to make Peter Cushing's character of Grand Moff Tarkin in the film, and I thought it was pretty good. I really did think it was pretty good. The technology is amazing. We never would have seen this, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and definitely nowhere past that.
It would have been like a cardboard cutout, and they would have been moving it around.
Right. It would have been a bad
What the heck is that?
Photoshop. Yeah. I liked it because I think that character has to be in this movie. And there's some things that we will definitely talk about in the spoiler cast section at the end. That this character had to be there. There was just some things that needed to happen story-wise. Now, there's enough dialogue with the character that there was times when the camera was in pretty close, and I've seen enough video games and enough recreations of humans digitally that you can tell when it's really bad, when it's just bad, or when it's okay, or when it's good. I thought this was kind of between okay and good. I didn't think it was great.
Right.
There was obviously some things that I'm like, it didn't look quite as lifelike as it could, but it did look like a cardboard cutout that was being, danced around by someone behind it.
And cut out the mouth and be like, "Hey, Mickey, give me a nice one, liquor again."
But I think if you didn't know going into it that this was going to be like a CGI character,
Right.
that I don't think you'd really notice. You'd be like, something's a little off about that guy. Maybe his makeup's a little weird, or he's just gotten really old.
Right.
That bad body odor.
But if you didn't know, you wouldn't really notice, I think. But because you're kind of looking for it, that's going to be there.
Right.
Then you kind of see that, and you're like, oh yeah, that's just slightly off, and I can't quite put my finger on it.
Right.
Right. Well, I mean, the definition of that, the uncanny valley, which is basically, the hypothesis of when humans are replicated, but and appear almost real, but not exactly. They elicit
Right.
feelings of, it says on Wikipedia, eeriness or revulsion among some observers. So when you watch the
I can
movie,
see that.
you throw open your mouth a little bit, that's why. It's not because of the popcorn. The jujubes aren't stale. Good and plenties are fine. It's in the valley when it dips off, and you see that. I actually have the same experience with Polar Express, and my kids love that freaking movie. And every time I see it, yeah, right. It's the guy on top, the hobo dude. I'm just like, something about him. It just doesn't. I want to puke in my mouth.
It's creepy. It's very creepy.
It is, right? It's a little too close for comfort. Like, I want my cartoons like Bart Simpson. I want to be 3 lines of hair. I don't want that creepiness. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I mean, let's go back a few years. You remember how they did the CGI for Gollum in the Lord of the Rings trilogy?
Right.
Now, he's supposed to look similar to a hobbit. They have a very similar lineage, and I thought that looked very realistic at times, the way they kind of did some of the hair and the facial things.
Right.
And that was really, really good. Now, they weren't trying to approximate completely with CGI human features.
Exactly.
But I mean, it still felt like a really good approximation of Hobbit-like features.
Yeah. So I think the difference there, like you said, and you hit it, is that it wasn't human-like, and so I think our minds still say, okay, this is still a non-human form, whatever. But you get into Tupac rapping, and excuse me.
Yeah. That of course, K2SO obviously was complete CGI.
Right.
The entire time, and because we're not talking about the uncanny valley, and it's not trying to approximate a human, no one probably is going to have any problem with how he looked.
Right.
Also, Forrest Whitaker's character, and this doesn't give anything away because you see this in the trailer, obviously doesn't have legs and they're mechanical, and that CGI looks pretty good. I mean, I thought it looked convincing the way he walks and whatnot.
Yeah.
Plus,
No,
plus Forrest Whitaker is just awesome, and
anything. Yeah.
him walking around on
Yeah.
metal stumps, I'm okay with. Let's do this.
Yeah. No, I thought he did a great job. I thought he and K2SO stole the show. So I thought it was a good role. And even though some of these roles are fairly small, maybe they come in for a cameo and whatnot. A lot of times those are some of the lasting kind of the lasting memories of the movie once finished. Is like, wow, that was just you made the most of that one line, man.
Yeah. So I definitely thought the CGI was really good in this movie. It didn't really feel super intrusive, but there's always a little bit to left to be desired, a little bit more that could be improved on as we go forward. And I'm sure before long, we won't even need actors anymore. It'll all be CGI, and we won't even notice.
That's right.
But until then, keep trying, buddy. We'll keep watching.
That's right. That's right.
So, overall impressions, Brita, let's go to you.
I loved it. I cannot wait to go see this thing again because it was so late and I'm tired and I was awake for it all. But I can't wait to go see it again. And the first viewing, I just kind of absorb the story and I'm just watching it and loving it. And I want to go see it again and catch more of those details that I know I missed. But great acting, great story, great music, just overall loved it.
Steve.
For me, I liked it. Again, I thought there were a lot of characters. There was a lot of technical explanation as to get into the story. Didn't necessarily get totally engaged with the two main Kason and Jin until probably 3/4 into the movie, and then I bought it, and then that's when I think was able to enjoy it. So by the end, they had me at hello. But yeah, so I liked it. I thought it was good. The payoff at the end, when you see it, you'll understand. Kind of made everything else. I hit the last scene, and it ends, and it suddenly made the last hour and a half like, oh, okay, that's why I went through that. Okay, I got that. Okay, that was a payoff. So it's good.
I'm definitely gonna say that this is one of my more favorite Star Wars movies. It definitely was really high up there. I mean, for like a super fan like myself, there's a lot of things, and we will get into this, but a lot of things that really hit for me that punched a ticket, and like it's checking boxes off, right? I'm going, yes, it has this. Yes, it has this. Yes, it has this. Oh man, it has this. It has this. There were some flaws. There were some things. It's not a perfect film. It's not going to be compared to Citizen Kane, except maybe by me.
Rosebud.
Right, but for my viewing, if you love Star Wars, if you like Star Wars, I think you're really going to enjoy this movie. If you're really into Star Wars and it consumes your life and that's all you can think about at times, you're going to love this movie. I don't see how you wouldn't. I think it's going to be right up your alley. So that being said, our question of the week is going to be for the listeners. We want to know what your impression of Star Wars, this Star Wars movie, Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. Give us your impressions and let us know what you thought about the use of CGI characters in this movie, because I'm curious to see how other people felt. I know how I felt, and obviously, how Steve and Brita feel now, but I want to know how you guys feel about the CGI characters. So go ahead and hit us up. We're on Twitter at Fort of Nerd. You can also reach us by Gmail if you want to go a little longer route and have more to say, and that's fortofnerd@gmail.com. Or you can come on over to our Facebook page, and you can just look up Fortress of Nerditude, and I think you can even use at Fort of Nerd on Facebook, and you can find us there. Let us know what you think. We will answer your questions next week. Also, if you have some Christmas memories or Christmas stories you want to share with us, go ahead and do that too, because we're going to be talking, obviously, some about Christmas next week, since we're going to record just the day after Christmas Day. So, Steve, we need people to find our podcast. We need people to get inside the Fortress of Nerditude with us. How can they do that?
They can rate us on iTunes, so the Fortress of Nerditude isn't as hard to buy as a ticket for opening night of Rogue One.
Nice. Well, it's been great talking with you guys. We are going to end it the way we usually end it. Don't go anywhere if you want to stick around for the spoiler cast. If you don't want to stick around for the spoiler cast and you haven't seen it, then let's leave this right here with you.
May the Force be with you, always.
Okay, so now, if you are still here, we're going to give you one last warning. We are going to talk about Rogue One. We're going to talk about characters, we're going to talk about plot, we're going to talk about bonuses and Easter eggs and all the goodies that we saw. If you haven't seen this, this is going to ruin it for you. I'm going to give you to the count of 3, and then we're going to get into this thing. 3, 2, 1. Okay, guys.
Computer explodes.
Yeah. I should have done it the other way. It'd be like my children. I'm going to give you to the count of 3, and then you're going to be in big trouble. 1,
You're
2,
going to timeout.
2.5.
Don't make me get the 3.
2 3/4. 2 5/8. What's after 5/8?
Just go do what I said.
Yeah. Just go to bed. Okay. So let's do this. Let's do the Rogue One Star Wars story spoiler cast. So
All right.
right off the bat, they said all along that this movie was going to end 10 minutes before the start of A New Hope. I didn't know how in the world we were going to get to that point.
Exactly. You're 5 minutes before the end. You're like, how is this going to happen? How are they going to wrap this up?
No idea. So let's go from the beginning of the movie to the end. Obviously, we're not going to go over everything, the finer points, but let's go beginning to end, and let's make sure that when we end 10 minutes before the beginning of A New Hope, and we'll end it right there, because I think that'd be kind of fun. So, starts off, right, where we get a shot of this guy, Galen Erso, and his little daughter, Jyn, and we get the villain of the movie, which is director Orson Krennic, right?
Yeah.
And
which he was phenomenal. I thought he was great. I thought he did a really good job.
Dude, I hate that guy.
Right. He was fantastic, right?
Yeah.
But he's basically tasked with the construction of the Death Star. Orson Krennic is, and Jyn Erso's father, Galen Erso, was basically like the scientist who designed the Death Star, right? And he kind of put it together. And they need him to come back because they're falling behind, and they need to get this thing working because the Emperor's looking towards it being completed, right? Obviously, I wasn't surprised that the mother who shows up and decides to hold a blaster pistol up when you had like 4 death troopers standing there. I mean, did you guys?
Probably not the best idea.
Yeah, you knew that was gonna happen.
Right. I was like, well, we're gonna get an orphan real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Partial orphan, but yes.
Right. So it jumps in. It laid it out pretty good. With this is the story. He's being pulled back in, sucked back into the Empire, and he tells his daughters, like, know that I love you, know that I'm doing this for you. So you know that you're going to see him sometime down the road in this film, and that they're going to be separated for a long time. Then it jumps forward basically like 15 years, which puts us literally within days. The majority of this movie is literally days before we're going to get introduced to Luke Skywalker in A New Hope.
Right. No, I thought that opening scene was good. I liked the actress that they had play the little girl. I thought Jyn, younger Jyn, and then we're introduced, of course, to Forrest Whitaker, to Saw Gerrera at that time. What's interesting though is I kind of questioned as you kind of the story progressed, if Galen's motivations had changed, if he had turned, or if he was still, true to his daughter and to wanting to do what's right. And so there's kind of some competing motivations and kind of altruistic, like he had to do this I don't know if we want to get into that, but that he basically had to help the Empire build the Death Star,
Right.
as
So
he says in the
this,
movie, because somebody would have.
right, exactly. The
Right.
the whole idea that if he didn't do it, someone else was going to do it.
Right. So he kind of could slow roll it.
Right. But as we find out later, he secretly hid a flaw inside the Death Star. He hid this issue with the reactor, that if the reactor were to be compromised, that it would set off a chain reaction and destroy the Death Star. But that only he knew how to set that up. Now, I tell you, from a storytelling perspective, it laid a layer on top of A New Hope
Yes.
for me, because all of a sudden I realized it wasn't just like they were incompetent. I mean,
Exactly.
they built this technological marvel that can destroy planets, and all of a sudden it has like this one like little super easy to find flaw. No, it was a very thought out, hidden flaw that was placed there, and he was trying to leak out that information so that someone would have a chance, someone would have hope of defeating this thing before it could do too much damage in the galaxy.
I was just gonna say, this is just like my favorite thing about this movie was when you hear him giving that message to his daughter is, I've created this little thing, and if you do this, you can destroy the whole thing. And that just like blew my mind,
Right.
basically. Like, that was totally on purpose. Like, this changes all the Star Wars that I've ever watched. Because how often have you watched A New Hope and been like, really?
Right.
All they have to do is
That's like
fly
a pill
down
you
this
had to
little thing,
swallow.
shoot one little thing here, and you blow up the whole thing. That is stupid.
Exactly. You've always kind of had to just like forego reasonableness and be like, all right, I'm gonna take that
Right.
up the tailpipe and swallow that pill and because I love the movies. But yeah, it added a layer of like this was done out of love from a dad to a daughter, love of the rebellion, everything it stood for. So yeah, I think there was a huge payoff, and that was a great insight that like Spencer, like Brita said, added a layer of complexity and of kind of the discovery. And we've talked about this in other podcasts, but the discovery aspect of making, and it's a cool thing because it's making things that you've already seen, stories that you already know, make sense.
Right.
Right. And it makes Galen Erso kind of like the ultimate rebel in my
Yeah.
mind. Like, he helps to build the thing, but he finds a way to destroy it, and he has to do it all right under the Empire's nose. Just right there. I loved it.
Well, I like that idea that it's, he knew he was going to be sacrificed. He knew he wasn't going to live to really see this thing. And so he knew that not only did he have to do this under the nose of everyone, but that he had to get that information out somehow. And he had to find someone he could trust to get this message to someone who could do something. And I always like hearing these stories of people who you may look at and think they're a bad person, but ultimately you find out that they're not a really bad person, that they maybe didn't have, the best environment or the best things that they were doing, but they really were at the heart of who they were, good people. I kind of come back to Severus Snape in the Harry Potter books, because you find out at the very end, after he's
Right.
been so apparently cruel and mistreated Harry, that he really was super in love with Harry's mother the entire time, almost his entire life, and that he really was trying to watch out and protect Harry, but he couldn't get too close and he couldn't get too involved because of other circumstances,
Right.
and the loyalties and whatnot. But to the very, very end, his loyalty in his heart was to Harry's mother, and it gives a twist and a layer of complexity to that character. And so I loved that with the Galen Erso character here in Rogue One. What I also thought was interesting was the interplay between him and director Orson Krennic, right? You get this sense that Orson Krennic is the bad guy right off the bat, and it's definitely that way. But then there becomes the part in the movie where Grand Moff Tarkin comes and basically, because he's his superior, basically takes over the Death Star.
Yeah. After it's done.
Yeah, and basically comes.
I claim this.
Yeah, basically comes in and like an overbearing boss, like takes all the credit and is gonna try to be the man for this, even though he wasn't involved and got in the last second. And that kind of dynamic for me, I went, I started thinking, am I really feeling compassion for director Krennic
Right.
at this point? Because they gave the bad guy an even bigger bad guy.
Right. And he goes to Lord Vader to kind of like whine to him, like, "Come on, I did this. It was me. Make sure the Emperor knows it was me."
So I looked at that
I was like,
and I
"You
kind of,
wuss."
I mean, I was like, yeah, he's kind of whiny, but here's a couple cool things to look at though. In the sense of like business, he's trying to do an end run around, right? He's
Oh, yeah.
trying to say, I've got someone who's higher up the chain. I'm going to go around this guy and get to the next guy up who's second in command, and I'm going to try to make my case known and lay my claim right here so that if things go well, I'm going to get the credit because I put in all my hard work. And so he's trying to end run around Grand Moff Tarkin.
Yeah, it's like a Dilbert episode, man. And you see that after he gets a little bit of the chokehold, you know, and Lord Vader, you know, he's walking away. You see him smirk at the end, like, okay, I've done what I came here to accomplish.
Right. Now, here's something else that's really cool about this scene. First of all, this is Vader's castle. And we've seen Ralph McQuarrie, who did all the original artwork and concept artwork for the original Star Wars, originally drew a castle for Darth Vader. And we've never actually seen that materialize in any film. So this kind of concept that they brought back from a Ralph McQuarrie concept drawing, for me as an uber nerd of Star Wars, I mean, obviously I'm talking about Ralph McQuarrie and concept drawings here. I loved that, but here's the really cool thing. It's on the planet Mustafar. This is the planet that Ben Kenobi basically chops off his arms and his legs. It's the planet where in between Episode 3 and Episode 4, Darth Vader continues to take Force children and Jedis to Mustafar to basically torture and kill them, and that's when when Jedis are captured, they get taken off there because obviously the big purge of Order 66 wasn't going to eliminate everyone, and we know it didn't eliminate everyone, but that he's still on Mustafar, and we get this cool shot of him being in this Bacta tank trying to basically like survive outside of his suit. Now, if you remember the scene in Empire Strikes Back where he's in kind of like that pod that's kind of open and he has his helmet off and he's trying to basically breathe without it, Darth Vader is literally trying to like push his physical boundaries to try to not be reliant on his suit. And we got to see kind of a scene of that in this movie, and there was a little snippet of that in Empire Strikes Back, and I really saw, for a super fan, I saw that and I was like, yes, yes, because I've heard about this for years, and this kind of whole concept that he's trying to push his own physical boundaries and survive as much as he can for as long as he can outside the suit and not rely on it. And then we got to actually see that. I thought that was really cool. I'm glad it wasn't Snoke from the Force Awakens that we were seeing. I'm glad the Emperor wasn't shown. I didn't want too many characters, big characters, to appear in this. But that scene on Mustafar with Vader and his castle, I thought was really cool. It did appear a little whiny and snivelly, just let me get the credit if everything goes well, mister. But
right. I'm up for a promotion.
Right. Now, I'll tell you one thing. How did you guys feel about when they tested the Death Star for the first time on Jedha, where they were only going with like a tenth of its normal power, not enough to destroy the planet, but enough to destroy the city? What did you guys think of that scene?
So I thought, I guess I didn't pick up on the fact that they only put the microwave on 50% power, because I was like, wait a minute. In past movies we've watched, like one
Blast.
fire, explodes the entire planet like that, and we've seen that before. So I guess I missed that, and at that point I was like, well, they're slow playing this, so obviously, our characters, our heroine and whatnot, can get off the planet, have time. I'm like, but before. So now that I know that, that's helpful. I didn't know they turned the power down.
Yeah, it's basically was just a test to see, because they didn't want to blow up the entire planet, but because they were waiting for that test for when Lord Vader was going to be there, because they needed to show that off to Vader so he could report to the Emperor. But they
Right.
they did do that test, and they blow up that city, and I thought that was really cool. And man, visually it looked amazing. That was nothing compared to at the end of the film when they use it again on like 1/10 power, basically to destroy Scarif and that city where the rebels are trying to get the plans out. And that when they do this and Grand Moff Tarkin does that, you have Orson Krennic down there. You had pretty
That's
much
right.
all the Death Troopers were pretty much wiped out. That's why we don't see them in the next movie. They're wiping out, all these rebels, and Grand Moff Tarkin doesn't even think. He's like, send us into hyperdrive. Let's go to Scarif, and bang, off they go. I mean, I was like, yep, they're going to use it again, and they're going to try to erase everything, with one fail swoop. And I was like, that's definitely the way the Empire works.
I thought one thing that I loved, which was one of the throwbacks, which I'm glad we're now in the post show, was when they're on Jeddah and they're walking through the kind of the bazaar or whatnot, and Jin hits shoulders with Dr. Cornelius. Evazan, and he's like, you watch it, and he's like, you'll be dead, same guy.
Yeah,
and I'm like, wait a minute.
Evazan and Ponda Baba. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. And so he had to obviously get off as well, because it's a short time later that the city's destroyed. So we know that he gets off because he's in the movies later. So
that's true. He does make it off world before the city gets annihilated. Something else, like talking about like little people that made like little cameos. I mean, obviously, we do see C-3PO and R2-D2 very, very briefly, and that one's going to stand out. Most people are going to notice that. But something I really liked, and I definitely have to go back and watch this again to catch this, was that they used some of the things from the Star Wars Rebels Disney XD animated show. They show
Really?
they show the Ghost, which is the ship that Hera, a character on that, flies around in. And they didn't just show it once, but they showed it a few times. They showed it on the ground outside of Yavin 4 at the temple there, and they also showed it again later as one of the ships that kind of like jumps into space over Scarif during the battle there. And I really, really, really thought that was cool. I also heard that there was a spot, and I didn't see this, but I've heard this, that the droid Chopper from the Star Wars Rebels can be seen rolling along on for a few seconds. So I definitely have to go back and watch for that, because that for me is totally a cool time, and Breed and I watched that and watch it with the boys.
I completely missed all of those. Totally missed them. So I really have to go back and watch it again so I can catch some of the stuff.
What did you guys think when Jimmy Smits appeared, when Bail Organa was first shown? And did you remember that he was Bail Organa from the Revenge of the Sith movie?
Yeah, I really wasn't that surprised to see him. I was excited to see him because I'm like, oh, I know who that is. But I wasn't that surprised. But maybe it's kind of because we've watched like the Star Wars Rebels, and this kind of takes place during that same time, and he's a character in that show as well.
Right.
So I wasn't really surprised because I know he's involved, and at this point he's obviously more involved with the Rebels than in some of the earlier Star Wars Rebels show. But I liked that.
So when I first saw him, there was a little part of me that was like a giddy child. I was like, yes, yes, Bail Organa, because they're showing now kind of the Council of the Rebel Alliance, right? They show Mon Mothma, and obviously, we saw her in the originals,
right.
and she's the leader of the Rebel Alliance, and so they recast her role. It wasn't CGI. They showed General Dodonna, and he's actually the military leader of the Rebel Alliance, and they recast his role, and he was there. And then, of course, showing Bail Organa, and he was kind of like the political arm of the Rebel Alliance. And so to see him, that was really cool for me, because it tied in some other stuff. And you really get the sense that Princess Leia in A New Hope, you get this idea that, she was intimately tied to it, maybe had a stronger presence. But I get the feeling that, it's more her father, but she was also a very trusted source, because obviously there's this conversation that takes place, right, where the leader kind of pulls, Mon Mothma kind of pulls Bail Organa aside, and she says, that friend of yours,
That's right.
we're gonna need to, some help. And he says, yes, he's been in hiding, but I still know how to get in contact with him. And she's like, you need to trust, your best person to get in touch with him. And he says, I've got the perfect person. I trust her with my life. And he's obviously talking about his daughter. And
Right.
I think most people probably picked up on that. I mean, I think that's a very overt kind of, little kind of Easter egg. But that conversation to me, I was like, for a super fan, I'm like, yes, it just kind of further like ropes in and really wants to establish that this movie is leading directly into the next film.
Yeah, no, you really get the sense that the rebel, you're kind of seeing this ragtag bunch of kind of coming together, and I thought it was an interesting play as well when they stand in council and they're kind of making the decision whether to go after and try to retrieve the plans and whatnot or not, and basically Jen just kind of goes on her own and she gets a handful of rebel soldiers to go with her, and they basically do it, and then the rest of the alliance is obviously kind of forced into similar
Right.
to the U.S. being forced into World War II. Basically, now we've got to go. Let's go to Scarif.
Well, the cool thing about that too is it wasn't just the rebels. I mean, they obviously like, oh, hey, they're doing this. We just intercepted a code that we've got rebels on Scarif, and so
Right.
they're like, oh, dang, we got to go there, and so like we got to get involved.
Pants down.
Right, but then the cool thing is that on the flip side of this is you have Orson Krennic who's there, and all of a sudden this explosion starts going off, and then he's like, no, he's like, don't you see what this is? He's like, red alert, throw up the shields, close the spaceport gate or whatever they were calling it. And then Grand Moff Tarkin gets news of what's going on, and he's like immediately like, we have to take the Death Star to Lightspeed. We have to get to Scarif immediately. So what Jyn Erso and her ragtag group of rogues does literally pulls in the Rebel Alliance and the Empire into direct, open conflict.
Right.
And that to me is just so cool that, it's a small act of a few people, really kicked off the open conflict between the two of them. And of course, they're having this great battle, right? And there was some other things that I saw and I noticed right away. And this is the uber nerd in me. The red leader and the gold leader who are, in the air, they're flying above Scarif.
Right.
They actually used real footage from A New Hope and the real dialogue from The New Hope. And it's actually the original guys. And they made that happen. And so for me, that kind of tied it in because these guys who fight over Scarif on that day literally fight in the Battle of Yavin like 3 days later when they make the trench run and they're going to attack the Death Star. And so it's cool to see them really tie back in, get, Red Leader and Gold Leader that we've seen before because they have bigger roles in the Battle of Yavin. And then, of course, we see Red 5 bite it, and that guy who's, his call sign is Red 5, he dies, which means that there's a vacancy. And so in a few days, Luke Skywalker takes that call sign on when he gets his assignment. And I thought that was kind of neat, too. I mean, it's, it's kind of dark. I mean, I'm not like relishing in the fact that like, haha, I know how this guy dies. But it was kind of something cool to see. Now, Steve, Brita, you tell me, when they get there and they've got this big shield around the planet and they're like, we just have this one open gate and you got to get through this and you got to have the right clearance to get through it, otherwise you can't. Did you think of Spaceballs?
The airlock?
I've never
airlock.
seen that.
Oh,
What?
no,
What?
Brita.
I
You haven't
haven't.
seen Spaceballs?
No.
Let's see
I
how
know,
well
I'm laughing.
you handle it.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the same code I have on my luggage.
That's right.
I thought of that scene for just a split second. I'm like, Spaceballs.
Now I'll never
which-
look at it the same way again. Thank you.
You're welcome. I mean, I try to do that. I really kind of like that kind of whole scene, and I really liked that they're like, if this thing shuts off, da 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 da, because it kind of reminded me of the whole like scene in Return of the Jedi, right? That if they don't get the shield generator down, all of their efforts is lost. It's
That's right.
no reason because
Yeah.
they can't do anything.
They really did do a great job at making it a nail biter at the end when they're trying to get it out, and the pilot, I forget his name, is trying to go back and forth, and then you've got the guardians of is it the at the temple back on Jeddah,
Right, kind of the guardians of the kyber crystals.
the kyber crystals. That's right. So that he makes the run, trusting in the Force. I mean, that was awesome. And then I've got to say, my favorite scene in the entire movie, besides the end, was when I forget who it is, but of the rebel says that Star Destroyer is inoperative, and then they make the move, the
Yes.
freaking move.
Yes.
The push bumper.
That was awesome.
Hey, Rubbin's racing.
That's right, man. That was freaking amazing. Like it's like the same feeling I had when you finally saw Yoda get crazy with the lightsaber. You're like, this is what I've been freaking waiting for, right? This is why I paid $16. So seeing that scene with the two Star Destroyers, freaking amazing.
So I thought that was so cool, especially when they started like pushing it, because I'm like, yeah, I mean, the physics of it's dead in space. Any sort of force on that thing is going to move it wherever they want to. And so they rammed it into the other Star Destroyer.
Awesome.
I was like, yes. I was like, yes. I was totally on board with that.
Oh yeah, I was loving that.
I tell you what, I went into this movie and there was part of me that in the back of my mind, I knew no one was going to live. I was like, every single one of our heroes and heroines in this film that they're setting up, no one's going to live. No one's going to come out of this thing alive. And I think part of that is because they reference in A New Hope, they say, many good people died to bring us this information, something to that effect.
Yeah, a lot of sacrifices or something.
Right. And so I knew that it was going to get dark, but then you had this whole thing where you lost kind of the priest guy, the blind guy, right, with the cane, who is kind of the guardian of the kyber crystals, his buddy that kind of watches over him. Then you lose
Bodhi.
You lose Bodhi, the pilot, right?
Yep.
And when he died, I was like, no, I really like that guy.
When he's trying so hard to help them.
Right. I'm like, even though, he's, his brain was scattered by a big alien, I still wanted him to make it out of there.
And I thought when the explosion happened, when the grenade goes in, I thought, oh crap, like there goes the transmission. They got to find another way. But apparently he had already sent the transmission.
Right. And then you have the whole scene where Jin and Cassian Andor, get the hard drive and they get up and they get to the tower and they have this huge fight. And I was like, they're not going to make it past this. They're not going to make it past this. And they do, and they get down, and then, man, the Death Star drops into orbit, and the shield is down, and Grand Moff Tarkin's like, basically, let's just do what we just did on Jedha, and let's take this out, and let's wipe all of this out. And so they don't fire it directly in the city, which I thought was interesting. They fire it out into the ocean a little bit, right? Because they're going to have this huge tidal wave, and they're going to have this, huge explosion that's still going to kill everyone. They didn't need to hit them directly, right? But it gave that great moment where they're on the beach kind of together. And what I loved is that they never played up like there was any sort of like love interest, which I'm glad they didn't, because I think that would have ruined it. That would have been bad. But it was more of this like, we respect one another, we're friends, we're comrades, right? We've gone through this together. And our mission was to get this out, and we did it. And they just kind of embrace the inevitable, and it wipes them all out. And I was like, man, that
was a beautiful scene. That was a beautiful scene.
It was,
yeah, and I loved it because it was like how what was his name, Cassian, was saying before that, like all those rebels, they had done all these horrible things, killed all these people, done all this stuff for the cause. And he's like, if we don't do this, if we don't get this message out and, if we can't accomplish our goal here, it's for nothing. And at that moment, that's when they're like, we did it. We made it worth it. Like, everything we've done is totally worth it because we got this out. We accomplished our goal, and we're going to be able to like save so many people and help the rebellion.
And so for 38 years of my respective life, you've always just assumed that the plans got on R2 and and all the rest, and kind of took it for granted. But I mean, that was really the payoff at the end to say, holy crap, look at everything that they had to go through to get these plans.
Right.
Awesome.
I mean, they had to confirm the validity of the story of the pilot in the first place, which meant that they had to go back and find Jin's father. Then when they find the father, he tells her this story and confirms that the Death Star is real and that there is a weakness and there is a flaw and the plans are over here on Scarif. And then she doesn't get the support, and so she just goes off and decides to do it. Like, all these things just kind of build up and everyone gets drawn in and all these people start dying. I mean, we're talking, hundreds of people obviously are dying, and there's people on both sides of the conflict. But you just look at it and you go, man, how close was that information to never making it out? Now, it gets to the point, right, where they upload the transmission to a ship, an Alderanian. They get it up into the fleet, and just as the fleet is getting ready to start jumping away, the ship that actually has the plans and they print it off onto the disc, they get boarded by Darth Vader.
None other than.
Now, that scene to me was the best scene in the whole movie for me, because we get to see, and gosh, let's be honest, Darth Vader had so little time on screen, but he is in my opinion, the best movie villain ever, hands down. And he gets on there, and the second he flips on his lightsaber,
he just mows them down.
I mean,
yeah,
it, like, you knew it was on. He's blocking every blaster bolt incoming. He's just
just like casual too.
Yeah.
Just like boom, 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 boom.
He's
super easy.
He's just torching them up, just lighting them up, knocking them down. And then he's also using the Force and choking guys and slamming them out of the way. He's relentless. Nothing is getting in his way. And you've got that hatch that's not, that won't open all the way. And the guy knows he's going to die. And so he hands off the data card. And then Vader immediately uses the Force and slams the door open. And, this guy's just barely, gets out, gets through the seal, bang. And then, boom, you see the ship drop free from the bigger ship. And I immediately went, that's Tantive 4. I was like, this is the ship that Leia is on. And then you see this messenger, he walks in, he rounds the corner, opens it up, and of course we see that back shot of Princess Leia.
Mm-hmm.
And then she turns around and he hands it to her.
With the cloak.
Yeah, he hands it to her, and he says, I hope this was worth it. And she says something in the line of, it was. This is hope. Now, for me, seeing Leia get that, I would have been okay if she actually wasn't in it, because I knew what that ship was and I knew what it represented on film immediately. I also would have been okay if they would have shown her from behind and just left it there and just ended it. I would have been okay with that too.
Right.
When they actually showed her, it's like we were talking about before, the CGI with her, I thought actually looked a little bit worse than with Grand Moff Tarkin. And
it was really close up. It was really close up. There were no shadows.
It was
right. And so for me, that uncanny valley, just a little bit, like, it just felt just a little off. And I get it. They also probably used Carrie Fisher and did the de-aging kind of technology to try to make that work. But once again, you had to have Grand Moff Tarkin in that film, because he really advanced the storyline of, like, taking over the Death Star and doing some initial tests and getting it ready to test on Alderaan. But you also had to have Princess Leia, because that one last moment at the end, you see her, and it kind of helps relieve some of the heaviness of just everyone dying, and then Vader just slaughtering people in his wake. it brings a moment of kind of actually hope.
Yeah.
The word that was used a time or two there. But it gives a moment where you kind of know, yes, it's going to be all right. We see the handoff, and now we know that Leia has it. And
But
the
you also
cool,
you also have that great like last scene where Vader is like at the pod bay door or whatever, standing there, his cloak, flying in the wind, and he's got his lightsaber in hand, almost
right?
like a Citizen Kane shot actually. And just you're kind of looking at him from below, and you're like, holy crap, he's a coming.
Yeah. So now we're at this point, right? Leia's got it. She's in Tantive 4. They just shot off. And that's where the movie ends. And we know that their intent was to end this movie about 10 minutes before the start of A New Hope, which means basically Vader gets back onto his ship, gets back to the bridge, and then they hunt him down. So that means that they probably either don't get into hyperspace and jump to light speed, or they do, but they don't get very far, and then they get overtaken and get pulled out. And I mean, we're literally about 10 minutes from the start of that movie, which means we're only about maybe 15 minutes from R2D2 and C3PO hitting on the surface of Tatooine and starting that adventure. And to me, like, that just made me realize that not only was this movie like coming right up to this, but I mean, at this time, like, Luke is, going down to Tashi Station for power converters with his friends, and he's dreaming of more, and he wants to go off and fight like his father did in the Clone Wars. And like, this is all happening at this moment, and we're just not seeing that, but we're about to see that. And for me, that was just I loved how they tied that together. That's that moment for me. I was just like, yes, yes, I have to go home and now watch A New Hope.
At 2 a.m.
Yeah, I mean, it was really late.
Pretty much.
So I'm gonna admit I didn't watch it right when I got
There you
home.
go. All right.
But
But we're totally gonna watch it this
yeah,
week.
I mean, it's not really a Christmas movie, and we try to watch Christmas movies around Christmas, but I can watch Star Wars at any time, and I can call it a Christmas movie if I dang well please.
That's right. That's right.
So
No,
anyway,
it's fantastic.
I loved this movie. I loved all the little drop-ins and hints. I thought, for my money, the story was really, really, really well done. I thought it's definitely worth the price of admission.
Even with the 3D goggles, I agree. So it was you get a thumbs up from me, and so for those of you still listening, get out there. If you haven't, well, obviously if you haven't seen it, then you don't need to now. So you're welcome. But if you have, go see it again, because again, Disney needs the money, and go back. Obviously, there's a lot of Easter eggs to find, and yeah.
Thanks for sticking around. If you stayed for the spoiler cast, we hope you enjoyed it. We wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things we loved and the things we saw, and we definitely wanted to make sure that we were free to do so without spoiling anything. So once again, I'm Spencer Stapleton with Steve Madura, my co-pilot, and then with my wife Brita Stapleton on this episode and doing our movie review. So thanks for being here, guys, and we look forward to talking to you soon.